What's up, guys? This is David. Welcome to Digital Fort. This year's South by Southwest is canceled due to the coronavirus and all that. So Fader decided to put it online. The Fader Fort is usually one of the hottest stages at South by Southwest. So this is a good opportunity for artists, producers, and engineers to kind of show off what they do. And I appreciate you guys for having me. I want to show you guys how I mixed racks in the middle, but I also want to show you guys my mastering chain and how I get beats to sound really loud without doing too much. Let's check it out. So right now I have it pre-mixed a little bit, but I want to show you guys my signal routing and all my gain staging. So I have my 808 kick and then the rest of my drums in purple, and then all the music is here. So from here to here is all my music tracks, all my drum tracks minus the kick and the bass, and this is the kick and this is the bass. So why I separate them like this is I like having individual control through auxes and subgroups up top. The 808s I have in its own category called bass. Kick has its own kick sub, and then the drums go into one bus, and then the music, all the other music goes into another bus. For specific songs, if they have like a really good or a really big string section, I might create another string section or whatever I would need to do. But for this song, I have the 808 kick, drums, music. How I have it placed up here, I have the kick parallel, I have the bass, which is the 808, the bass high, which is a parallel copy where I only boost up the highs. I have a low pass filter on it so you don't hear all the bass on there, and you just hear kind of like the top end of the bass. And then I have a parallel of the bass in general. And then I have drums, and then music, and then music parallel, which I use to widen the image. And then I have a beat sub. So I know it's kind of confusing, but if we're just following the kick, it would go from kick to these two copies, kick and then kick parallel, which would feed into beat, which would then go into my final mix bus. So if I have vocals, they would meet there with the beat. What I want to show you is kind of how I level my stuff. So I'll start with the 808. Now I'll bring my kick next to it. The kick is always gonna be louder for me than the 808 because the kick is closer to the range of frequencies that we hear better. So that's gonna accentuate the 808 for me. I've noticed a lot of people just raise their 808 really high, and then what that does is takes headroom from the rest of the instruments in the song. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to give it its own space. You know, and every mixer and engineer has their blend of sounds that they like to go to. I like having my drums a little louder than my music, and I like it dominated by kick and snare, just because, you know, all the hip hop that I grew up listening to was like that. A lot of Dr. Dre and, you know, DJ Quick, a lot of kick, a lot of clap and snare. So, you know, being a West Coast boy, I kind of went that direction naturally. If I have additional percussions, I use this plugin called Relay from Isotope to pan or spread. So this is the clap on the offbeat. I put it on the left, and then I put this snare on the right to kind of give it a bit of an interesting feel. Because if everything is down the middle, your 808, your kick, your voice, your vocals, they're not going to have a lot of room to breathe. So, you know, just by placing instruments in different places in your panning, it can free up a lot of space. And then this is all the music I got on here. That's kind of the blend I have for the rest of the instruments. And as you see, the instruments kind of progress, and then by the end of it we have like strings and stuff come in, just to give it more of a dynamic feel. But the drums are the ones driving the song. So the reason I have so many stops for my signal flow is because I compress almost every step of the way. I had a really hard time getting my stuff really loud, and it bugged me, even though it shouldn't. You know, we're not supposed to fall under the pressure of the loudness wars that we're in, but every engineer, we kind of have a soft spot for it. And if we can, we would want our shit to be loud while, you know, being nice and open and dynamic. So if you can do that, you know, a lot of Drake stuff, 40 is really good at making stuff sound really big and loud without the smash effect. And if the smash effect, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, is when, you know, the kicks and the 808s and the vocals, they all kind of feel like they're at the same level and nobody can really pop out. So if you listen to a lot of Drake stuff, his mix engineer knows what he's doing. So my 808 is going into bass, which I have 2 copies of. Actually 3 copies. This is untouched, just a regular bass. I use a lot of saturation on my 808s and bass. First thing I'm going to do is, this is my side chain coming from my kick. So every time the kick hits, it's only going to notch out. It's a dynamic EQ at 96 hertz. So every time the kick hits, it's going to duck it at 96 hertz. That's just letting the kick breathe a little bit more. And then I have one of my favorite saturation plugins, Phoenix 2 by Crane Song. And there's a bunch of settings on there. Opal, gold, sapphire, that's, you know, just focusing on low end, flat, and high end. And then you have all these dials which go from high end to low end. And they have really funny names, but I like what they do. So I give it a 40% process with this one, and then I have another Phoenix 2 where I'm focusing on the low end and I'm just processing at 5%. And then I have this plugin Lo-Fi by Avid. It's one of my favorite plugins for low end, to give it a little bit of distortion and saturation and some bit crushing, I guess. And then I compress it about 3 dBs at the end. Give it a little bit of makeup, but not really, because it's gonna go to the beat. And see, I already compressed it here, 3 dB, along with the high and the parallel. When it goes to the beat, it's gonna come in all together with the other elements of the beat. And then I'm gonna compress it with a limiter. This is usually more than I do, that I'm comfortable with, but you know, use your ears. If it sounds okay, then you're probably good. Once you start hearing being very crunchy or less dynamic, that's when you should back up a little. I want to show you guys. So if I go, you can kind of feel the sensation which is known as pumping, where every time the 808 or the kick hits, the other sounds get ducked a little bit. So I'm trying to avoid that. I just want, 4 or 5 dBs of compression. I can live with that. I'll go 2 dB. And then I use the Shep's EQ to give it a boost on the sides. So we're on the sides here. I'm gonna give it about a 2 dB boost. This is a mid-side processor, which means this is gonna control the middle. And you can tell by the label here, M. And then this knob is gonna be, or this fader is gonna be side. If we're just listening to side, you can hear what it's doing. You can hear mid, that's in mono now. This is with everything together. It just gives it like a wider feel. And then I'm just gonna duck off a little bit at 1K to make room for the vocals. And it's supposed to be side chaining to the vocal tracks, but we don't have vocals here, so it's not really doing anything right now. Matter of fact, I'm gonna bypass it. So my kick, how do I make it kind of stand out? I have a REQ on it. It's only boosting a little bit at 60. And then I have a Phoenix on this guy too. 100% gold radiant. And then I have a black box to give it a little bit more saturation. I usually just use the triode. The saturation, it gets a little bit crunchy for my taste. Just enough to give it a little pop. And then I'm gonna compress it at the end of that. Another 3 dB. And then the copy of the kick, my parallel. You're not gonna really hear it unless we're soloed. It sounds nasty on its own, but what it's doing is adding a little bit of the clarity of the kick. I'm cutting under 90 and then giving it a little bit of attack and sustain with the smack attack from Waves. And then once again, I'm using Phoenix on one of the higher modes, which means affects higher frequencies. And I'm giving it about 20% processing and then compressing significantly more on this step because we don't really need the full body sound of this. So I'm gonna adjust that accordingly. Let's hear us out. Originally, when I mixed this song, I mixed the kick a lot louder than that. But, you know, these days my tastes have changed and I kind of like my kick and bass a little bit closer than I used to. I used to have my kick stand out too crazy. And even though, you know, people fucked with it, I had trouble really getting it loud because the kick was doing too much. So I kind of learned to bring it down and find other ways to make it stand out in the mix. Okay, let's talk about mastering chain. There's a lot going on here, and you know, this is just a culmination of years of experience, I guess, and frustration, where I didn't know how to get my stuff loud. So I tried a bunch of shit, and this is kind of what I settled on for now. It's always changing, and I just started using multiple limiters like this, but it works for most genres of music. Sometimes it doesn't, and I have to adjust it for a specific song, but it's been working pretty well for me. My first thing is a Massenburg EQ. I'm taking out frequencies that I don't like in the song. And for this particular song, I'm taking out a little bit of 30 hertz because more than hearing that, it's eating up your headroom. And a lot of people listen to music in their cars, on their phones, and on their laptops these days, and they're not hearing 30 hertz in there. The 30 hertz is the sub region, and if you really want to hear what it sounds like, That's what 30 hertz sounds like. You can't really hear it. You can feel it more than anything. But that's somewhere I felt like I can sacrifice some volume. And it's weird because I took off some of the 30 hertz, but the song got louder. That just tells me that it has more space to breathe now. And then I have my first layer of compression. Again, really slow attack speed, fast release, 4:1 ratio, and I'm compressing about 3 dB, and then making it up however much for the next plugin. If you make it up too much and it goes into the next plugin clipping, that's not really favorable. So, just watch your output gain on your compressors. My next plugin is another EQ. I'm taking a little bit of the mids, the low mids out, some 500, some 130, and then giving 10K a little boost, hopefully to add a little sheen to it. And then I have the black box doing a little bit of saturating with the triode, and then a little bit of air. It starts at 50%, so 55% is like barely doing anything. And then I have my first Phoenix, which is 30% processing, gold, radiant, which is probably the flattest setting. And then I have another Phoenix that's 5%, 5.5%, sapphire, iridescent setting, which means it's more adding sparkle and clarity to the mix. My first limiter is the L2. I'm only giving it a dB at this point. I'm not really limiting anything or doing any compression. This is more going through the plugin for the sound of the plugin. And then I have an AQ P1A from Pultec, which is a fixed frequency EQ. So you got 20, 30, 60, 100 hertz on the low end side. And then the high end side, you have 3K, 4K, 5, 8, 10, 12, and 16. I don't really need to add a lot to it because this is in my mastering stage. And you know what? A lot goes a long way when you master, because a dB when you're mastering is very, very different from if you boost your 808 a dB from in the beginning of your chain, because it's going through compression and it ends up not being a dB at the end of the day. Do you get me? If you gain clip something, it's not gonna sound the same as going to the last plugin of your chain and turning up the gain there. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding like a dB of 100 and then a dB of 16K. 16K is all the way up there. It's really just adding a little bit of shine. I'm gonna exaggerate it so you can hear it. That's what 16K sounds like, but I want a little bit of that. So it rounds it out, it gives a little bit of the lows and a little bit of the highs, and it gives me like a nice little balance. The next plugin on my chain is a multi-band compressor. So these are my settings. I have one at 42, 160, 900, 4K, and then 16K. I kind of start here and then I change it as I go. And I'm not trying to compress a lot. So the most compression I'm doing on any of these bands is 2 dBs. And it's happening right in the midsection. So that kind of levels it out for me. So my last compressor limiter can do the most work. You can see, I'm going compressing 6 to 8 dBs. My attack is slow, release is a little faster, and occasionally I'll turn on oversampling, but it is CPU intensive, so for that reason I have it off right now. So from start to finish, that's my chain. I know I didn't go into every single plugin, but I just wanted to show you guys how to get your low end to play nicely with each other, and then for your song overall to sound really nice and loud without over compressing it. And, you guys pour a lot of heart and soul into your music, and it would be a shame to fuck it all up with a limiter just to make it sound loud. You know what I mean? A lot of times you take the limiter off and it sounds way better, but you can't put that song out like that because of the pressure of competing with the other songs out there. So I understand, and that's why that was the whole point of this video. I really wanted to get you guys closer to the level that you want to be at without sacrificing too much of your quality. So yeah, man, this is David, and check me out on YouTube, All Up in the Mix, or on IG, David Young and Kim. If you fuck with it, you know, hit me with a follow, subscribe, comment, anything. If you see anything I can do better, let me know. And I hope y'all enjoy this video, man. I'm out. Peace.